Thanks very much indeed. It is indeed a very, very big pleasure for me to be here addressing you this morning because we at FAO, we attach a huge importance to this event and of course to the whole area of saving food and reducing food losses and waste. Now, FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, has as its major objective to eradicate hunger. And that is an objective that we wish to accomplish within our lifetimes. So I hope, and I hope to live, to be able to see a world without hunger. But that is not easy to achieve. We know that we're going in the right direction because hunger has been actually reducing, and quite substantially. Since 1992 to today, there's 200 million people less suffering from chronic hunger in the world, and that's a good achievement. But we're moving in the right direction, but not fast enough. So for us in FAO, we, with the aim of eradicating hunger, we must do it in very specific ways, not in any way. We have to do it sustainably. We have to increase agricultural production, fisheries, forestry, but we have to do it in a sustainable way. By doing so, we need to be equitable, we need to be inclusive, we need to ensure that women's rights, producers' rights, indigenous peoples' rights, all of different constituents' rights are respected, are followed. And at the same time, we need to ensure that we will be reducing poverty and that we would be increasing resilience, especially of rural communities, to shocks. So these are objectives that are very much interlinked. How do we do it? We do it through mostly technical assistance. In the UN, there are different kinds of organizations. There are funds, there's programs, and there's the specialized agencies. And FAO is a specialized agency in the area, it's the most important specialized agency in this area. And we do our work basically by helping countries set up the policies that are needed to eradicate hunger in the ways that I said before. We do it through the production of global public goods, the data. Many of you may use the data that's produced, actually the data that we are using today when we're talking about food waste and losses. So we produce evidence, we produce data. And we have a privileged relationship, of course, with governments. And the UN, we are an intergovernmental organization. And so, of course, we have that privileged relationship with the governments. Now, we have realized that it is impossible for any constituency to eliminate hunger, and all the more so if we want to do it within our lifetimes. It is not the FAO, of course, we're a small organization contributing to member countries. It is not the governments on their own. Without incorporating all of the different actors, very specifically the private sector, civil society, producer organizations, cooperatives, research institutions, academia, we will never do the job. It is only through having good, solid, sustainable partnerships that we know that we will be able to make a good contribution to eliminating hunger. Now, each one of the partners will be contributing in a very different way towards this overall goal. So from our part, from the FAO part, of course, we have that privileged relationship with the governments, with the ministries, very specifically the ministries of agriculture, rural development, fisheries, forestries, and other ministries. And very importantly, we work together with them, for example, to ensure an enabling environment that is necessary for the private sector to be able to work in a country. So that's this is some of the contribution that we bring to the table. We work with others to set standards, like, for example, in the Codex Alimentarios, these standards that are so very important to all of us here in the room. We have presence in 90 countries, 5 regional offices, and our headquarters in Rome. Now, for us, we are moving towards having more, stronger, and longer-term partnerships with the private sector. We have this kind of relationship in a very, very high place because we're looking very much towards the private sector to what you are bringing into the picture. So in the past, our relationship with the private sector was much more one of seeing who could fund our initiatives, where we could get additional funding for our programs. Today it's of a very different nature. Today we're looking at the true partnerships with the private sector in order to have a mutually beneficial relationship by which we from the United Nations will be benefiting from the know-how, from the capacity of innovation, from knowing how to do things in a more efficient way, from looking at ways of introducing change into processes, for example, which are better than we are able to do from the United Nations point of view. So we look at the private sector, and we look very highly at the private sector to be able to mutually learn very specifically in these areas, but in many others too. Now, we also believe that the relationship must be of a win-win nature. In the past, and I may say that many of the United Nations organizations looked at the private sector with a little bit of, okay, let us not get too engaged. There's a lot of risk involved. There's a lot of issues around reputational risk and conflict of interest. So there's a little bit of worry relationship. Today, we believe that, yes, we are able to ensure a relationship with the private sector that is going to be of a win-win nature. And win-win, I'm saying, for us, it's very important that, of course, we contribute to reducing poverty. For the private sector, it's very important to work with societies where poverty is very reduced or non-existent, because, of course, there's going to be better markets. So there is a possibility of having a win-win relationship by which both private sector and the UN contribute from different angles to these common goals and are able to find a win-win solution. Yes, with profits for the private sector, because of course that's the nature. Yes, with development goals from our side, because that's our nature. And we believe that the relationship has to be of a win-win nature, or if not, it's not going to be sustainable. If we receive, in the past, there is, from corporate social responsibility, we're able to receive a few funds here, a few funds there, have a project going on here, a project going there, and that's good, but that's not enough. We believe that we can go much further down the road. Let me just give you one example. With the Rabobank, we are being able to address one very specific problem of the smallholders. You may know that most of agriculture is done today in smallholder farms. Our data last year for the year of family farming showed that 72% of farms in the world, 72% have less than 1 hectare. 84% have less than 2 hectares. Now, quite frankly, how are you going to have sustainable production? How are you going to contribute to reducing poverty, reducing hunger with holdings that are so tiny that many times are even under subsistence level? Now, one of the big bottlenecks that these small productions have is, of course, credit. Now, who is going to loan money to smallholders that have less than 1 hectare, that are below subsistence level? Well, this is why we went to the Rabobank. Rabobank has 110 years of experience, helped the Dutch people when they were poor hundreds of years ago. They helped the Dutch people to get out of poverty. And how? By developing a very interesting cooperative banking model that helped get the Dutch people out of poverty. So why not use that know-how, that experience, in order to help the smallholders below the poverty line in Africa to get out of poverty? And that's exactly what we're doing in partnership with the Rabobank. That's a partnership that is working very well, and we show very well what is the different things that we bring to the table from the different angles. And today, thanks to that partnership, we're contributing to having smallholders raise out of poverty. So we need to find angles by which those partnerships are going to be win-win, and once they're on, once they're going, they are going to be sustainable by their own means. Today, we're facing a very different situation, as I said, in relationship between the developing world and the private sector. And if you look at the post-2015 development goals, you will see a very important role for the private sector. Today, the private sector is being called by the international community in the goals that are going to be approved next General Assembly of the United Nations next September, looking at the private sector as a contributor to development. Not only as somebody who is around but gives sometimes a little bit of funds. No, a contributor to the goals of development, which are going to be measurable. A measurable contribution to development, and that is a new role. So today, we're looking at the private sector as somebody who would be able to think together with us and the development community around the problems, around the solutions, and then to see how we can bring in our comparative advantages to arrive at those solutions. Now, private sector, obviously, excuse me, in the food industry is a major player. We cannot do development in thinking about hunger reduction, think about food and agriculture without the private sector and without the big industries around the food sector. So what we want from the private sector is to be able to join forces, to address problems, and to find common solutions. Good business for the private sector, good business for us, because we're reaching our development goals. But we, of course, want all of this done in a way which is considered by the international community as responsible behavior. And thanks to the work of the CFS, and we're going to hear from Herda Verburg in a moment, we have instruments that are seen by the international community as giving the lines of responsible behavior. So we're calling upon the private sector to join in terms of voluntary guidelines for the responsible governance of tenure, fisheries and forestry, and also recently approved the principles for responsible investment in agriculture. So from the point of view of FAO, we're very happy that we are being able to work with you on this very important issue of reducing food waste and losses. And we believe very strongly that what we are going to do together is going to be a model for other areas of the private sector to see how good, solid partnerships are being able to contribute in a sustainable way to eliminate hunger within our lifetimes. Thank you very much.